She mocked him, dismissed him, and treated him like nothing until Clint Eastwood revealed who he really was. In that moment, her world shattered, and she learned a lesson she'd never forget. Clint Eastwood arrived at Summit Ridge Country Club, an exclusive retreat nestled in the snow-covered peaks of Aspen, Colorado. The club, known for its lavish amenities, strict guest lists, and elite clientele, was a sanctuary for the ultra-wealthy. CEOs, socialites, and political elites who prided themselves on their refined taste. Inside the grand lounge, under the glow of crystal chandeliers, the atmosphere was sophisticated yet pretentious. Waiters in black tuxedos glided between tables, catering to guests sipping $1,000 bottles of wine. Unlike them, Clint wore a simple gray polo and slacks, blending in with the background like an ordinary traveler. Unbothered, he strolled in and took a seat at a prime corner table, one typically reserved for the club's most powerful members. His calm, rugged presence stood in stark contrast to the polished, high society elites around him. Samantha Ellis, a young, ambitious waitress with a sharp eye for status, immediately noticed him. With an air of subtle arrogance, she approached, assuming he was a lost tourist or an aging guest who had wandered into a place far beyond his means. "Sir, can I help you?" she asked, her tone polite but layered with unmistakable condescension. Samantha Ellis stood beside Clint's table, her practiced smile hiding a sharp edge of condescension. She had spent years perfecting the art of subtly dismissing those who didn't belong, and this moment was no different. Clint, with his plain attire and unassuming demeanor, was an outlier in a space reserved for Aspen's elite business moguls, tech billionaires, and socialites draped in designer brands. She glanced toward the main dining area, where a group of young venture capitalists laughed over cocktails, their conversations filled with talks of stock portfolios and luxury investments. Looking back at Clint, she let out a small, controlled sigh before speaking. "Sir, this section is reserved for our exclusive members," she said, keeping her tone professional but firm. "If you're looking for our public lounge, it's located near the garden." Her words hung in the air, carefully chosen to imply that he didn't belong here. Clint simply lifted his glass of whiskey, took a slow sip, and set it down without a word. His silence unsettled her, yet she pressed on, unwilling to let him sit in such a prime location meant for distinguished guests. At the next table, Victor Harrington, a wealthy tech investor, leaned back in his leather chair, observing the interaction with amusement. "You know," he chuckled, swirling his glass of brandy, "old-timers do wander into the wrong places sometimes." His companions, equally smug in their privilege, chuckled in agreement. Samantha smirked, emboldened by their reaction. "I'm sure we can find you something more fitting," she added, lowering her voice slightly. "This isn't a roadside diner after all." Nearby, Mark Reynolds, the club's veteran bartender, wiped down a crystal tumbler, his keen eyes flicking toward Clint. Unlike Samantha, he recognized the man at the table but remained silent. Knowing Clint's temperament, he had seen this kind of arrogance before, and he knew exactly how this would end. Clint finally looked up, his expression unreadable, his eyes steady. "You think people like me don't belong here?" he asked, his voice low, calm, and dangerously composed. Samantha barely hesitated before responding. "I just know this club has certain standards." A flicker of something, amusement, anticipation, crossed Clint's face. He picked up his phone, pressed a button, and placed it to his ear. The moment of reckoning had begun. Clint Eastwood remained perfectly still, his fingers lightly resting on his whiskey glass as the tension in the room thickened. Samantha Ellis stood firm, believing she had successfully asserted the club's exclusivity, unaware that she had just insulted the very man who controlled it. Victor Harrington, still lounging at the next table, smirked as he leaned toward his companions, clearly entertained by the exchange. The club's elegant chandeliers cast a golden glow over the scene, illuminating Samantha's growing impatience as Clint, with measured calmness, pulled his phone from his pocket and dialed a number. "Jerry, bring me the ownership documents," he said, his gravelly voice carrying effortlessly across the room. "And the membership records too. I want them here, now." The air in the lounge grew unnaturally silent. Conversations hushed, glasses paused mid-sip, and Samantha felt the weight of dozens of eyes turning toward her. A flicker of unease passed through her, but she pushed it aside. "Excuse me?" she scoffed, folding her arms, trying to regain control. "Sir, I don't know who you think you are, but this is a private establishment. We don't allow—" Before she could finish, the club's general manager, Richard Graves, rushed in, his normally composed demeanor visibly shaken. He cut through the stunned guests, his eyes locked on Clint, and stopped abruptly beside Samantha. Mr. Eastwood, my sincerest apologies, Graves blurted out, slightly breathless. We didn't realize you had arrived. Samantha blinked, confusion flooding her features. Mr. Eastwood, she turned sharply toward Clint, her face draining of color. The whispers among the guests grew louder. How had she not known? Clint finally set his phone down, lifting his drink again as he watched Samantha grapple with the reality of her mistake. That's because I don't announce myself, he said, his voice steady, his signature smirk appearing for the first time. You see, I don't need a membership here. I own the damn place. A sharp gasp escaped from somewhere in the room. Victor's smug expression disappeared in an instant, his posture stiffening. Samantha's breath hitched as the weight of her words came crashing down on her. She had just mocked Clint Eastwood, the club's owner, a Hollywood legend, and a man known for never forgetting a slight. The room stood frozen in stunned silence, every guest, server, and bartender caught in the weight of Clint Eastwood's revelation. Samantha Ellis felt her breath falter, her chest tightening as the full realization hit her. She had not only insulted a customer, but the owner of the most prestigious country club in Aspen. Across the lounge, Victor Harrington, once so amused by the scene, shifted uncomfortably in his seat, suddenly eager to avoid Clint's gaze. The laughter had died, replaced by the unmistakable tension of embarrassment. Samantha, her voice barely above a whisper, stumbled over her words. I didn't know. But Clint, still calm, simply leaned forward, his piercing eyes locking onto hers. And yet, you assumed, he said, his voice low but carrying the weight of authority. The general manager, Richard Graves, was sweating now, his hands clasped nervously in front of him. Mr. Eastwood, please allow me to personally. Clint raised a hand, silencing him without effort. No need for dramatics, Richard. I don't fire people for one mistake. I let them decide if they want to fix it. He turned his gaze back to Samantha, whose confidence had crumbled entirely. So, here's your choice. A hushed stillness fell over the club as everyone leaned in, waiting for his next words. You can leave right now, walk out that door, and find somewhere else that values appearance over character, Clint said, his tone even, measured. Or you can stay, learn what real class means, and let Mark here teach you how to actually serve with respect. Samantha turned, startled to see Mark Reynolds, the veteran bartender, stepping forward. He gave her a small nod, his expression unreadable but not unkind. The moment stretched, the weight of choice pressing down on her. Pride urged her to run, to escape the humiliation, but another part, the part that now saw how foolish she had been, kept her rooted to the floor. With a deep breath, she straightened her shoulders and met Clint's gaze. I'd like to stay and learn, sir. A satisfied murmur spread through the room. Clint gave a small nod, lifting his whiskey once more. Good choice. Months had passed since that fateful evening at Summit Ridge Country Club, and the once arrogant Samantha Ellis had transformed into one of the most respected servers in the establishment. No longer driven by status or appearances, she had embraced the lessons of genuine hospitality, learning under the guidance of Mark Reynolds, the veteran bartender. Where she once dismissed guests based on their looks, she now understood that true class had nothing to do with wealth or designer labels. It was about character, humility, and respect. Every Friday evening, as the sun dipped behind the snow-covered peaks of Aspen, Clint Eastwood returned to his usual corner table, dressed as simply as ever, sipping his favorite whiskey. His presence, once overlooked by those obsessed with exclusivity, was now recognized for what it truly was, a reminder that real dignity never demands attention. Samantha, now carrying herself with quiet confidence, approached his table, setting down his drink with care. Neat, just how you like it, sir, she said, her voice steady, no longer filled with misplaced superiority. Clint studied her for a moment before offering the smallest of nods. You've done well, he said simply. Across the room, Victor Harrington sat uneasily, his laughter long forgotten, his arrogance tempered by the lesson he had unwillingly witnessed. As Clint took a slow sip of his drink, the quiet understanding between him and Samantha needed no further words. Respect had been earned, and a lesson in true class had been learned. In today's world, where people are often judged by their appearance, social status, or online following, Clint Eastwood's lesson on true class is more relevant than ever. Too many people assume that wealth, power, or designer clothes define a person's worth, but the reality is far different. Respect isn't about looking important, it's about how you treat others, no matter who they are. Samantha's mistake was one that many make today, valuing image over character. But real success doesn't come from arrogance or exclusivity. It comes from humility, open-mindedness, and the willingness to learn. In business, relationships, and life, those who dismiss others based on surface-level impressions often miss out on their greatest opportunities. True class is quiet, doesn't seek validation, and is rooted in integrity. The next time you meet someone, don't judge them by their clothes, their car, or their job. Judge them by their actions. That's the mark of real success.